Hey, y'all. Y'all are the most tenacious of the conference attendees. You have wore this thing out. We're down to the last session, and I've been asked to introduce the speakers, and it makes a lot of sense. The session is a conversation about hemp, and it's being led by Mr. Ed Berg and Scott Perez. And it makes sense that I would introduce this session and these people because I don't know either one of them, and I don't know a damn thing about hemp. But thanks to the wisdom of Google, I know everything I need to know about Mr. Berg and Mr. Perez. Ed's first career was a petroleum geologist, but he retired and started a second career in regenerative agriculture. He now grows hemp to heal the soil on his farm in Colorado, utilizing plants and animals and good holistic management. Mr. Perez grew up in a Midwest farming community. He came west in 1976, began a 25-year career as a working cowboy and guide. In 2000, he returned to college and ultimately got a master's degree from Cornell University, where he taught natural resource management and American Indian studies. Now he is in Colorado, where he grows and researches hemp. So, look forward to it. Well, I'm out.
Ed, before you start, I'm going to swap your microphone. I want to make sure you sound good. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I was introduced by an amazing farmer, and I'm going to be followed by a very experienced farmer, rancher, and it's clear to me I don't have a hat. Anyway, I'm not a farmer. I'm a retired petroleum geologist, and I got interested in land restoration when my wife and I retired to Salida, Colorado, up in the Upper Arkansas Valley, which if you go north through the Rio Grande Valley and you keep going and you climb up out of the Rio Grande Rift Valley and get into the southern San Luis Valley, and you drive through the San Luis Valley for a long time, and then you come up out of that and you drop into the Upper Arkansas Valley, and that's where we are. And the Upper Arkansas Valley is ground zero for retired people who want to get out of the city or the suburbia and buy a chunk of this gorgeous countryside. And the check they write to the realtor or the mortgage company under our current system of wisdom entitles them to take care of this, which is very much like handing your keys to your 14-year-old teenager. That's a short-term plan, and then handing the keys to the kid and then telling him to go out and drive on the freeway is kind of similar to not educating anybody about soil management. So I ended up on the Upper Arkansas Soil Conservation District Board, and I've been removing layers of ignorance ever since. The issue in the valley is it's a desert valley, and all of the water on the land that is so attractive to the incoming would-be land buyers or tourists, the green comes from the snowmelt, and that's not immediately apparent. And the only way that snowmelt ends up on the land is by irrigating through ditches and then up onto whatever distribution system you've got. And that's coupled with the retirement plan of a lot of ranchers. Their kids don't want to ranch, so they subdivide and sell it. And then their neighbors complain that the water level in their wells is going down because, well, their neighbors are no longer irrigating. So we're in this gridlock. And last week, I attended a meeting called Ranchers and Realtors. That was a ray of light, because the realtors are taking a role in educating the land buyers. This is a good thing. So where does hemp come in? Being on the board, one of the other board members said, you ought to look at industrial hemp. That's a really good thing to make hempcrete out of, and maybe we could use it as a cash crop for ranchers. So I got into hemp. Wow. And how many people here don't know that hemp is certainly the most valuable crop on earth? Anybody know that? Nobody knows that yet. Wow. There's no part of the plant that isn't useful. You can make everything from a substitute for fiberglass that's 30% lighter, 30% stronger. Stupid car companies are using it. People like Lotus, BMW, and Mercedes. Why not Chevrolet? In 16, I borrowed an acre of ground to plant in some seeds that was going to grow for seeds, which are one of nature's most perfect combinations of proteins and amino acids. That was what I thought was a low-hanging fruit to introduce to ranchers. I didn't know anything about the plant. The rancher I borrowed an acre from didn't know anything about the plant. He was worried that the plant would hurt the cows. I was worried that the cows would hurt the plants. And so we delayed until the ground had warmed up, and I planted on the 1st of July. And the other thing that warmed up was ant colonies on the edge of the field. They ate every single seed. There wasn't one single seed left. So then I sort of sat back and gathered up my irrigation equipment and thought, we'll see what happens. What happened was I got called by a couple of guys that wanted to grow medicinal hemp. I hadn't even heard of CBD. Does anybody here know what CBD? Anybody here using it? If you're not using it and you're over 65, you're missing something. So in 2016, zero crop. In 2017, I planted with these two guys, and they knew a lot about hemp, but what they knew about was marijuana and growing it indoors and not outdoors on a farm. So we planted 2,500 seedlings. We had a very rainy year. I didn't know how to cultivate or till the land or relieve the land of the water that was falling on it. We harvested about 200, and we got about 45 pounds of flour, which is what you want for the hemp, the CBD oil. So that was the end of that year, and we had some things we thought, well, vertical integration. Let's do the cash acceleration as you go towards the final product. So our company's logo now is our dirt to your hurt, and vertical integration is the key. We're working with some farmers up north of Santa Fe in San Cristobal, which is going to be a good thing because we then had a year of drought. We got 1,100 pounds. We are still using that in our product. The kick up is not from something like 5% to 20%. It's more like 20 to 200 fold. I'm serious. This is why we're making product in our kitchen. We're still a mom and pop operation, mom and pop and daughter, and we want to expand. We want to buy the farm we're currently leasing and turn it into an integrated, multiple crop, multiple product stream that will be a change from multiple streams of waste and one single product, which was cow manure. It was a dairy farm. So we're going to turn it over to an experienced farmer next year. He's already producing compost, and things will change. I'm not going back to being a geologist in the oil business. I want to be on that farm. I don't necessarily want to live there or farm there. Somebody better than I can do that. But we will be putting hemp into the local food supply. We haven't broken into the cows yet, the cow-calf operations, but we will, and we will be part of the the vegetable supply. The best vegetable farmer in the valley grew 1 3/4 acres of hemp, and it's now stored in our barn, awaiting the extraction bottleneck to relieve and the prices to go up. And we'll find a way to work with him, and we will be part of our community and part of the future. Thanks.
My friend Julie last night said she was looking forward to see what I was going to say, and I had to tell her, so am I. Because I have no idea what I'm going to say till I stand up here and look at y'all. One thing I would like to say is, if you look around this room, I think y'all deserve a hand for yourselves for coming into this kind of work and doing what needs to be done. So I have some of my old cowboy friends who said, what the hell are you doing growing hemp? You know, they're used to seeing me do other things. And kind of a long, roundabout story, and it ties into all of this. Hemp is probably the most regenerative plant that we could have, both for your health, for the soil health, and for our economics. It grows well with little water, with no pesticides, and I'm talking pure industrial hemp. I'm not talking about the highly bred, high CBD strains. I'm talking about the industrial hemp that you make your building materials out of, your clothing. It can feed you. It can help remediate soil by pulling toxins and heavy metals out. It can pull even radiation out. There's all different kinds of things it can do. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was cowboying, and I'd gone down to Arizona, and I met a guy named Dan Daggett, who some of y'all might know. And he came out to a ranch, and we started having these conversations about how to improve the land with grazing, which y'all are probably familiar with. Then I went over to New Mexico. I was doing some cowboying on the Block Ranch, and the owner's daughter, Sally, said, hey, you got to come over and see what this guy, Sid Goodlow's, doing on his property. So I went over there and checked that out. And I realized that, yeah, we could properly manage this. And at a conference, probably after a few too many glasses of wine, where we were talking about how we could restore the landscape with cattle and stuff like that, a representative from the Sierra Club, after I said, well, what did you think of all that? And she said, well, it makes sense, but we really can't talk about that because it wouldn't be good for our fundraising. So, you know, I started putting all these things together. And then I went off to school to get myself overeducated. And I read a report on how they had used industrial hemp to pull some of the radiation out at Chernobyl over the years. And I started thinking back on, okay, we've done this for land restoration with the cattle and stuff, and we've actually improved mine tailings and mining sites and reclamation sites with cattle, but we've improved the soil, but those pollutants are still down in there. So what if we find plants that can pull those out and really make a difference? Then the food and the grass for the cattle and stuff that comes out would be much healthier for all of us. So I started doing a little bit of more research. We are way behind in the United States on hemp. You know, other countries are far, far ahead of us. Israel's probably done the most work, and getting stuff out of Israel, though they hold that close to the vest, but I got lucky because a colleague happened to have been on those research projects in Israel and managed to slip me some of the projects and the information. So I started trying to put two and two together, and I was the first grower in my area. I was Hemp Farmer of the Year 1 year. The second year, I think that they had such a thing. And I started meeting more and more people, and we started talking more and more about it. Now, if you look at all the things hemp can do, we can make building materials out of it. All right, that's great. Now, what if we take this hemp, we use it for pulling toxins, heavy metals, and all that stuff out of the ground, Then we turn it into these building materials like hempcrete, hemp insulation, stuff that's packed away. We've now taken that stuff out of our soil, and we now have healthier soil. Radiation, I'm not quite sure how we deal with that. If it pulls the stuff out there, because we have troubles with radiation disposal no matter where it is, so they're still working on that. But how many in here have grown hemp? Anybody? I had a feeling you might by your reaction to the previous speaker. How many of you are interested in growing hemp? Well, that's good, because this is a crop that can help your soil in other ways too. The hemp roots will go deep. They will help break up the soil. They increase your biodiversity in the soil by quite a bit. Your economics can go up. I have the last figures I was able to pull up, and I don't want to get them wrong. If you just grew a hemp crop, not counting the CBD, which is a whole separate thing, your hemp grain will bring you 60 to 65 cents a pound, and you get about 1,000 pounds of grain off of an acre of hemp. They've now got it figured out how you can actually combine it. They're working out systems to help with that process. So if you figure you've spent maybe $350 in your planting, because you're not going to spend much more than that, because it doesn't require much water, it doesn't require fertilizer, and it doesn't require pesticides for the most part, that's not a bad profit. And then the fiber alone, that's worth $260 a ton, and you'll get 2 to 3 tons off of your field. So that's not too bad of a return for a crop that you don't have to take much care of. So how can we build community off of that? How do we regenerate ourselves? This room is a community. If everybody here started looking into this and started helping each other, we've now built a bigger community. You can see it would also help our local economies. One of the biggest problems right now is everything we get. If you go to a health food store and you're buying hemp seed or hemp oil or something like that, chances are it came from China or one of the European countries or Canada. We need to change that. We need to, and I'm hoping this is a good group to do this, we need to get a little more proactive. If you really are interested in growing hemp, I'm going to ask you to do one thing between now and January 1st. Go to the USDA's website and look at their proposed hemp regulations. They have regulations there that are going to kill small producers. Those regulations are built for the big boys. They're not built for small producers. Simple little things like this 0.3 THC level that you all have probably heard of to qualify as hemp. That's a number that they just pulled out of their hat somewhere. It came off of a report where a guy used that as an example, and suddenly that became the standard. True hemp, the standard would be a ratio of CBD to THC. That's what we have to fight for. So make comments on that. The second part of it that'll hurt a small producer is going to be their testing. They are requiring you to have the top 2 inches of bud tested from your plant. That is where the most THC in a plant is concentrated. The rest of the plant, if you ground up the whole plant, might be well below the limit, but that bud might have 0.4, 0.5, even 1, 2. So we have to make comments like that. So I'm urging you, if you are interested in hemp at all, please get a little more politically active, talk to your representatives, and go to the USDA website and do your comments. The comment period is up the end of December. I'm going to skip that part. Trees. This is supposed to be partly about carbon restoration. If you take a hemp, 1 ton of hemp will bring in 1.63 tons of carbon and put that back in, that's taken out of the atmosphere. Now there's arguments about whether carbons really are a big problem or not, but there's no doubt that it's good for the soil. If you're growing your hemp in clean soil, So if you're growing your hemp in clean soil and you just turn it back into the ground, you're now increasing your fertility levels in your soil. I've been doing experiments for the last 6 years where I am growing hemp under all kinds of conditions. I will water some with different types of irrigation. I will water some with no irrigation at all. Next year's experiment is I'm going to get some varieties, I believe out of Australia, that they use for dry land, and try to plant it like winter wheat and see how that will work for people who don't have irrigation. So, hemp is one of those products that it's one of those things that is most valuable. Our whole systems have grown up with it. Human beings we've grown up with it. Cannabinoids and terpenes, we have receptors for all of that in our bodies, and you can get that through many things, but hemp is the ideal way to do it. So with that, we're probably going to turn it over to some questions, and I'm also going to be around. Ed's going to be around. Please feel free to grab me in the hall. Our contact information is in the programs there. Don't hesitate to email me and ask me any questions you wish, because my goal is to get it out there so people will grow it, people will use it, and we can all have a better lifestyle because of it. Thanks.
All right, do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, back here. Start there. Can cows eat it?
Oh boy. Not only can they, but it is tremendously nutritious for them. The leaves, when the plant's growing, are loaded with terpenes, and they're really bitter. And the good news about that is you can have hordes of grasshoppers in your field that jump on, they jump off. The cows won't eat it. We haven't had any damage from deer. The good thing is if you have cows, especially dairy cows, but breeding cows, and you've got plastic twine out there on the field, they will scarf that down too. And it makes a plastic bulge in their tummy, and that's deadly after a while. And if you're baling your crops with hemp twine, they get that in their tummy, and it slows down the digestion, but they get more nutrition for every bit of feed that they eat. Win-win.
Yeah, and I would say, looking at the studies, not only can you eat it, but that may be the absolute best way to use it as medicine. Because of all the receptors in our bodies, it goes to work immediately. The way I got into using it for medicine and diet is I have a young son who suffered a stroke when he was 11. And he started eating hemp about the same time I did as part of his diet. I can't say that that's what has helped him come along as far as he did, but considering they gave him 48 hours to live 10 years ago, I think he's doing okay. And thank you. I also eat it myself, and it's when I'm in the fields, I'll just be chewing on it, or I'll throw the leaves into a salad or something and eat it that way. It's good for livestock, even though Colorado thinks we need more studies. I mean, just because people fed it to their livestock for 10,000 years, why not study it a little more? I remember when I started, somebody had asked a question to the last speaker about how do you get along with your extension agents. And when I first started growing, I went to our local extension agent and I said, "Hey, I want to grow some hemp. It's legal. How do I do this? What do I need to know?" And he looked at me and he said, "We can't talk about that because technically it was still federally illegal. Technically now it's still federally illegal. It isn't the DEA owns it now. The USDA does, But as he's talking to me, he's writing people's names on slips of paper and sliding them across his desk to me to let me know that, yeah, we're going to help you out one way or the other." So,
How about another question?
How have you been doing you said you did some tests with no irrigation, and were you getting like 13 inches a year or something like that?
What was the last part?
Your rainfall, is that like about like 13 to 15 inches a year? How has that been going without irrigation?
What I've discovered without irrigation is my plants don't get as tall as as the stuff I am irrigating. But what I also found was the compounds in the plants, when I get them tested, are quite a bit higher. So I think that the stress is what increases that. Now the risk of that is if you don't have a good strain of industrial hemp, you know, a good natural strain, you risk getting that THC level to pop too high where you could end up having to supposedly destroy your crop. So there's a little risk, but as far as the value of the plant itself, I haven't really seen any kind of difference.
So we grow with no fertilizer, no herbicide, no pesticide, no whatever. We've noticed, well, see, 2018 was a drought year, so we barely irrigated whatever we could squeeze out of the irrigation system we had. And the previous year that was very wet, our extract came out at 55 to 60% CBD, which is good. In the drought year, it came out 72 to 75%, which is over the top. And we didn't know jack about what we were doing. We just left it up to the seeds. And that just brings up the topic. Be very careful where you get either seedlings or seeds or clones from. You've got to get good quality material that's genetically stable, and you'll still end up with variants. You can harvest or test a different part of the plant, it'll change. You can harvest a week apart, it'll change. It can go up, it can go down. The 3.3% is a regulatory absurdity. I can't put a better word or a more polite word on than that. It's totally meaningless. So yeah, read the USDA rules and write your congressman. There's a world of stuff to talk about. It's a rugged, reliable, hardy plant, but it's complicated.
Thank you both. I wondered what you know about how we can get that industrial hemp, I'm thinking, Scott, into fiber and start making fabrics and using it for clothing and getting rid of all the plastics in our clothing.
The fiber is the highest hanging fruit economically. The CBD is the lowest hanging fruit because you can process it, you know, from the flower to a marketable product in your kitchen. Next would come the seeds and the fiber, which I agree, it's extremely important to get these nanoplastic waste out of our biosphere. That takes the most important, the most expensive processing installation, you know, tens of millions of dollars, and it's the least valuable product. It's also the fiber plants, you'd plant them this far apart on an acre and grow 100,000 in an acre, and they grow tall and have a little bitty seed stalk at the top, and there are now combines that harvest the seeds at the top, flip them into a bin, and then they cut the bottom, and that goes, it gets off to the side where it can weather a little bit. That's an expensive piece of equipment. There's not a combine in the upper Arkansas Valley. It's ranching. It's ranch country. So I want to build a house out of hempcrete, but I'm going to have to buy the fiber for that from Canada or Europe. If you grow for the flower or for seeds, you have a plant that's like this, looks like a little Christmas tree, or if you give it good nutrients, it'll get up this big. And it can come from exactly the same batch of seeds. It's really a resilient plant.
Yeah, that was a good question, because one of my biggest frustrations is, you know, we made clothing and fiber and cloth out of this stuff for, you know, hundreds of years, and we don't know how to do it anymore short of the old labor-intensive ways of doing it. And because of the CBD bubble that has developed, all of investment money has been going into that. We're not getting the kind of investment we need in building materials, fiber, and things like that. But in Colorado, up by Glenwood Springs, there's a woman named Barbara Filippone who's been working on this for a number of years, and I think they're real close to being able to make this very marketable, and I'd be happy to discuss that with anybody at any time and exchange contact information for her.
Any other questions? We've got some over here.
I was on the way down here and I was reading the NPR article on the market bubble and the subsequent crash of the CBD this year. And because of the federal, change in law, the amount of producers grew by 500%, while the amount of processors didn't grow at all. And so now all these farmers are stuck with it's a highly labor-intensive process to get that flour. And I guess my question now is, because of that kind of delay in processing, catching up with production, if, as a young person looking at hemp as an interesting crop, I feel like I should wait until, and I'm just wondering, it's good to encourage people to look at it as something to examine, but I'm just hesitant because I feel like we're, if you jump in it too quick, it's just going to burn you.
Right. It's a rodeo. With the regulatory hurdles, we've spent a year getting a bank account. We got our bank account day before yesterday, a bank account. And we still don't have an active credit card service sale for our website. So we've just been selling to our neighbors, people in town. Yeah, there are terrific hurdles right now. The extraction is the big bottleneck. That will go away. And now I'm going to do a sales pitch for vertical integration. Your crop, you're going to harvest 550 pounds. It's worth $30 or $40 a pound if you're lucky and have a good crop. But for every pound, you can probably produce 2,500 sale units at 1 ounce to 2 ounces apiece with 400 or 500 milligrams of CBD in it and sell it for 40 or 50 bucks. That's the kind of uptick. But then you've got to get your website working, and there are workable websites. They all got in before the banks got scared of prosecution by our federal government, which is there to help us. Whether you want to wait or not depends upon you. We're encouraging small farmers to get into it, but identify your neighbors who might want to be interested in doing the extraction and not interested in farming. Some of them went to school and they're interested in chemistry. So we're working towards collaborating with an on-site extraction service, and that right now is the one part that's missing in our vertical supply chain. But regardless of the fact that the USDA dominantly assists the big guys, I still think there's a great future for the small guys in the craft industry, because look what happened to craft beer. The total dollar growth in craft beer, distributed among a whole lot of little guys, has been vastly greater than the growth in the Budweisers. And the people that we all thought, or older people than I did, thought that the Mondavis and the Gallos and the real cheap wine industry was going to put the wine growers out of business. That happened in the 50s and 60s. And look at all of the craft estate bottled wines that are out there, and they're selling for the top of the market prices because they have the highest credibility and they have the highest connection from the consumer to the land. And that's what we want to do, connect the consumer to the land. And there's a thirst and a hunger in the consumption market to get in contact with the source. And hemp can really do that. Same as craft beef.
Yeah, I would encourage you to grow anyway. I mean, I have farmers that I work with who grew for the CBD, and then they're saying, well, what can we do with all this? We don't have infrastructure for the fibers, for the building materials and stuff. I said, if you got room, like you got an old hay barn or something, bale it and store it, because that market will come. And if you're a small producer, you know, it might take you several years to get up enough to make it worthwhile, but you can do it. The caveat for if you've never done this before, you're interested in doing it, and Ed touched on this before, know who you're getting your seeds or your plants from. Because if you go to one of the hemp trade shows, I guarantee you half the people up there are con artists. I've been growing since it was legal. There's people who'd never planted a seed in their life are sitting up there telling you they are experts. And they are guaranteeing you that a seed they developed in controlled conditions in a greenhouse is going to give you 20% CBD with legal THC. The thing about the hemp plant is you take that plant out of that greenhouse, you take the seeds out of that greenhouse, and you put it anywhere you want, even 50 miles apart. Different soil, different water, different altitude, different temperature. All of that changes the chemical structure of the plant. So you got to know who you're buying from and do your homework. Please don't get taken by some of these people. I've had at least a dozen farmers in the last 3 months contact me and say, hey, could you come out, and we're having real problems with our plants. They're not growing right. And our preliminary test results are like this. And every one of them got their seed from one of these people at some trade show without doing their homework. So please, do your homework.
All right. I'm going to ask you both if you have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up. And you don't have to have closing thoughts either. That's all right.
Yeah, the only thing I want to do is I do want to reiterate, please, if you're interested in this, know your source for your materials, do your homework, and go online, go to the USDA's page, and make your comments to the USDA supporting small farmers and small producers, and let's keep this in the hands of us and not in the hands of Marlboro or whoever the heck else is going to get into it.
What he said, this crop has a place in the Great Plains on a 10,000 acre farm with 32 row equipment. There will be a commodity market, just like in box wine or, you know, the equivalent in beer. But there will be a place for those who aim high, always.
Let's give Ed and Scott a round of applause, please.